Good morning, one and all. Department of Prosthodontics at Shetty Memorial Institute of Dental Sciences would like to welcome everyone for this research, for this for its continued dental education program on research publication. Research has become one of the mainstream mandatory requirements for academics, and with numerous research articles being published, there is a lot of pressure on everyone to get them published in good journals. In this regard, Department of Prosthodontics has planned continued dental education. Two eminent speakers, Dr. Ngopi as well as Dr. Pragati. Dr. Gopi is chief editor of Journal of Indian Prosthodontic Society. Ever since he has taken his tour as a chief editor, the journal has done extremely well. Currently, it is PubMed indexed as well as it is Q2 rated journal. And Pragati, she's been doing extensively a lot of work in research methodology field. My friends, Dr. Manoj and Dr. Nirupama, would be introducing each of the guests later. At this juncture, I would like to request our beloved Dean, Professor Dr. U.S. Krishnanak, to deliver the welcome address.
A very good morning to all gathered or those who are logged in for this very, I would say, rather interesting and very useful and a topic which is the need of the hour, research publication being conducted by the Department of Prosthodontics and the Dental Education Unit of our institution, the Shetty Memorial Institute of Dental Sciences. I would first of all like to congratulate Professor Dr. Chetan, Professor Manoj, and the entire team behind this team for having organized very thoughtfully. The topic is very well selected, and the faculty, Dr. Gopi Chandar, the editor of the Journal of Indian Prosthodontic Society, and Dr. Pragati Kurani, both of them are experts or specialists in their field, and I'm sure they are going to highlight the participants today on research publication. Now, I would like to heartily welcome our guest speakers, Dr. Gopi Chandar and Dr. Pragati, and also like to thank them for accepting our invitation to participate and spend a couple of hours with us this morning and enlighten all our faculty and all the postgraduate students and also the ones from the neighboring institutions and all those who have logged in about research publication. The need for publication cannot be overemphasized. You know about whether it is research per se, and of course, once there is some research, it goes for publication, probably patency and beyond. These days, the onus by any national ranking agency, whether it is NAC, whether it is NIRF, or anything, the onus is today more on research, I would say, consciously than teaching. I'm not too sure whether it's the right way forward, but having said that, it is here to stay. And I only implore upon each one of you, as much as there's a lot of pressure on everyone, I know that, and none of us are born researchers. Some of us have probably have it in us to, that acumen, research acumen, but not all of us are born researchers. So any which way, I think research publication is a very well thought of and selected topic, and definitely how you select a topic, how you go about it, everything is important. And I'm sure the guest faculty of today's program are Dr. Gopi Chandar and Dr. Pragati are going to enlighten the audience about the same. I would like to welcome all the participants who are going to get enlightened or get, I would say, may I use the word, richer in knowledge at the end of this program. And once again, I may sound repetitive, but Dr. Chetan and Manoj and the entire department of prosthodontics requires a big kudos from my side. And in fact, all the departments, please permit me, and we are now firing on all cylinders, and each department is conducting various programs. In fact, almost 3 to 4 days in a week, we are having various programs. It's a very, very encouraging, should I say, trend. Now, we always had this. Because of COVID in between for some time, it was a little, obviously, a little dull. It has caught on in the last 2-3 months, and I'm it's very heartening to note that. So all my colleagues, kindly keep up this trend, and needless to say, you have all my support, whatever you require regarding the CDE programs, regarding teaching, learning, regarding research, anything, you know that. So I will not take too much of your time. I wish all of you a very fruitful deliberation in the next couple of hours, and have a very great day ahead. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for that very brief but that thoughtful opening remarks for today's continuing dental education program. Both the resource persons will be on Zoom link, whereas all the registered participants will be joining us on Nitte YouTube link. So going ahead with today's program, let me I hereby invite Dr. Manoj Shetty to introduce Dr. Ngopi. Dr. Manoj Shetty, please.
Hello, Dr. Ngopi. He's a well-known personality in the field of prosthodontics. I don't think he needs an introduction for any prosthodontist here. For the benefit of my postgraduate students and other fellow colleagues of mine, I'd like to briefly introduce Dr. Ngopi Chandar. He had an MDS, DNB, and FDS degree from Glasgow. He's currently a professor in SRM Dental College, Rampuram, Chennai, and he has a major interest in the field of research and advanced prosthodontics. He has published, presented, and lectured in various national and international forums. He is accomplished with various numerous awards with publication and a best presentation, and overall the best teachers award. He is the recipient of many fellowship and diploma awards from international organizations, namely Fellow in Craniofacial Academy, Fellow in DTR and Digital Occlusion, Fellow in International College of Dentists. He is also trained on advanced prosthodontics from University of Osaka, Japan, and CAD/CAM Innovation from Germany. For being a member of various national and international organizations, he is actively involved in participation, lecturing, organizing workshops, organizing conferences. Presently, he is also editor of Journal of Indian Prosthodontic Society and a vice president of Indian Society of Prosthodontic, Periodontic, and Restorative Dentistry. And he has got to his credit various publications, 71 publications to his credit, along with that two funded projects also. And recently has authored a textbook of preclinical prosthodontics in the year 2021. I request Ngopi to take over from now. For the participants, if there's any question, please post it on the chat box, which will be dealt with at later stages.
Am I audible? Dr. Manoj, am I audible?
Yes, you're audible.
Thank you. Thank you for the wonderful introduction. I'm a small person compared to the entire team and the staffs who is working in AB Shetty. Of course, we mutually share, learn from all our colleagues. The entire AB Shetty team was magnanimous enough in supporting me in a lot of ventures, especially in the journal. They helped me in terms of reviewing and fast tracking the editorial process. And I thank personally Dr. Shetty for inviting me for this lecture. And also have my colleagues. Hi to Dr. Pragati. She's also been greatly involved in our editorial board process. It's more of a team rather than the individual activity that helped us to move forward in terms of our journal. And my warmest greetings to our beloved principal, Dr. Krishna Naik, whom we know him for the past 20 years as a student, as a faculty, now is heading the institutions. Good morning, sir. When we were discussing about a topic between me and Dr. Shetty, we were discussing something which is required at present situation where everyone needs a publication at the earliest. Across the country, people blame me for accepting or rejecting the manuscripts for the Journal of Indian Prosthodontic Society. The other side, as mentioned in the introductions, saying that we need publications at the earliest, where there's a pressure from various governing bodies, either it's NAG or NIRF or any other organizations which demands publications from the faculty and the academic environment. Apart from that, it also gives a lot of credentials to the students, especially when you convert your dissertations or short-term projects into your publications. It gives a lot of recognition and credentials. More than the pressures, I think we take it on the lighter side, saying that for our passion and in terms of for our recognitions, if at all we start publishing the articles, it gives a lot of satisfaction. Forget about the monetary benefits or the credentials or the advantages we get in terms of the academic environment. It gives us a lot of satisfactions. So in that way, if we look in terms of publishing a manuscripts, it gives more credentials in terms of the personal satisfaction rather than in terms of the monetary concerns which we are looking in terms of from the universities or from the regulatory organizations. So coming back, when we were discussing in terms of the topic, the present situation where most of us require a publication at the earliest phase. To be honest, it is not that easy to publish, that is known, but the process of publications almost takes a lot of time, especially in terms of the international journals or high impact journals. It takes consumes a lot of time. In that phase, I am briefly giving you in terms of certain takeaway points, which can help in terms of reducing your reviewing time or processing time. In that way, it helps you to publish your articles at the earliest, rather than saying that it can happen overnight or in short span of time in a week. Mind you, something comes in a very fast phase, in a day or a week, it's not going to be acceptable. I'm speaking to a more recognized professional community. They know what is terms of predatory journals and a low impact journals. So you want a quality publication, it consumes time. Rather than saying that making some silly mistakes or some kinds of minor errors, which is going to delay our processing, if at all we concentrate on these aspects, it will reduce our editorial process and fasten your publishing publications. So that is the thought process here in terms of fast tracking the publications. Don't expect me to speak in terms of overnight publication or few hours of publications. That is not possible in terms of a good quality journals. So entire thought process is structured in terms of how to fast track your reviewing process or the editorial board process. Because many of us know all these components, but only thing is we don't look into that in detail when we structure our manuscripts. There are certain issues like plagiarism, references, the type of research, authorship, which happens, majority of the issues happen once it gets accepted by the journal. There's issues between the authorship. And the major concern at the present situation is two aspects, that is ethics and plagiarisms. Of course, manuscript preparation and scripting of the manuscript plays a greater role. My colleague, Dr. Pragati, will be speaking in detail in terms of how to structure a manuscript. My concerns in terms of, as an editor, I'll be looking at brief you in terms of what are the aspects in which I look in terms of the manuscript when it's going to be submitted to the journal. The foremost factor that plays a critical role is the theme of the journal or the target journal. So the majority of the community is going to be prosthodontics or general dentistry. It's more important that you pick the right journal. For the prosthodontics, you have these many, like Journal of Indian Prosthodontic Society, Journal of Prosthetic Dentistry, Journal of Prosthodontics, International Journal of Prosthodontics. Similarly, you have in terms of your dental materials or implants or forensic dentistry or aesthetic dentistry or general. So almost all journals accept these manuscripts that has been done in terms of our dentistry, especially in terms of prosthodontics. But few journals are specific in terms of their theme. Few talk in terms of clinical research, few talk in terms of material research, few are very specific about implantology, few are so focused on aesthetic dentistry. So though our research are interrelated, it's interdisciplinary, we have to choose the right journal. I cannot submit my prosthodontic clinical research to a dental material journal. Of course, they might take it to the process, it might be reviewed. An average review time is going to be, for any standard journal, is going to be 2 to 3 months. So if after 2 to 3 months, if a reviewer is going to say that, no, this doesn't fit in the scope of the journal or the theme of the journal, you're going to lose the valuable time in terms of 3 months. Again, you have to resubmit to another journal. It's going to take a process. So think about the right journal in which you're going to submit. For example, Journal of Indian Prosthodontic Society has got a diversified acceptance in terms of the prosthodontics, innovations, and new thoughts. Everything is acceptable, whereas the same thing is not acceptable by the other prosthodontic journals. So read the theme of the journal, go to the about the journal thoughts in the text box that is going to be given in each journal, look into the parameters in which it's going to accept the articles, and appropriately submit your articles. I think this is basic. Obviously, it is known to people, but majority of the people, us majority, including me, because of the impact of journal, we try to submit our different areas of research to a journal which is not taking up that kind of research. So there's a paramount important aspect in which we have to think in terms of before submitting our manuscripts. Next is the need. And then, as we have been discussing in terms of the requirements, in terms of the regulatory bodies, there's a pressure and the need from the faculties, and the pressure and need for the students, because the majority of the universities require that students to submit publish at least one article before they finish their post-graduation period. So think in terms of your need. If you have sufficient time phase, then you can take you a lot of time in terms of submitting to the high quality journals, because on average, high impact journals will have, of course, rejection can come immediately. If at all it's going to be an acceptance or reviewing process, the minimum reviewing phase is going to be at least 2 months on average for a standard journals. Say even for a Journal of Indian Prosthodontic Society, we take at least 2 months for this first submissions and 1 month for the revised submission. The same thing holds good for almost all standard journals. The response time is going to be 2 months for your initial submissions. Of course, it can happen in terms of desk rejections, that if it doesn't fit into the categories or the requirements of the journal, they reject it immediately. But in terms of the acceptance or reviewing process, it's going to take some time. So in a third year postgraduate student, if it's going to be close to the exams and he has a pressure to submit, need a pressure of having a publications, he has to plan and organize himself accordingly, especially for the examinations. So time phase is important. Of course, majority of our journals give the data in terms of what the processing times, in terms of the phase it is going to take, in terms of the reviewing process. All is listed in the journal website. Now, it's also mandatory that the regulatory bodies for the journals insist the editors to display it in the websites. Next is the quality, which is again, Now the pressure is in terms of the numbers of publications. Gradually, it's going to move towards the impact factors of the quality of the journals. The quality in terms reflected in terms of the impact factor of the journals. Of course, there will be plus and minus thoughts about these impact factors. But let us be realistic. We ourselves know a standard journal which has got a decent impact factor is more globally recognized, rather than talking about a low impact journal or grade A journals. So whatever articles you write or submit has to be in terms of a good quality journals, so that your value of research is going to be improved and you have a wider global audience for your research. There's always confusions, might be for this. There's a confusions between the journal metrics, the impact factors, and the data that is going to be available in the journals. Don't get carried away with the numbers that is being given in the websites or in terms of the commercial project promotions. The databases are in terms of the PubMed Central, Web of Sciences, Embase, Scopus, Ovid, and Cochrane, where you go and search for your articles. So these are called as databases. Of course, now we are speaking to environment who are more tech friendly. It's more digitally involved. So for the people like me, Dr. Manoj, Dr. Chetan, of course not Pragati, Dr. Pragati may not fit into this category, who are more in terms of the digital world. When we started in terms of our postgraduate life or in terms of research, we are supposed to go to the books or hard copies and search for the articles. These are not available that easily for us. Now everything is shifted to the digital domain. So instead of searching for these books, when you search it in the electronically in these domains, these are called as databases. So you search, these have search engines. We search for this, the required data. So these are called as databases. So don't get confused between the metrics. That is almost in certain situations, it's going to be synonymous. The metrics or the official impact factor of the journal is given by only one organization, that is Clarivate Analytics. Don't get confused between the impact factor ratings given by various organizations and agencies. The only one agency which is globally recognized to give you an impact factor for a journal is Clarivate Analytics. Earlier, it was to be handled by different organizations. Of course, we don't have to get into the differences in terms of the names. It was ISI, Reuters, and Web of Sciences, which were involved in giving us the impact factors. Now it's taken over by the Clarivate Analytica. So this is the only organization which gives you impact factor. Of course, the numbers varies from 1 or lesser than 1 to 50 or 60 to our known journals. There are a few organizations, especially your index Copernicus. It's more of a journal listing. It's not an organization which can give you an impact factor. If at all you see your commercial promotions, you will say that in index Copernicus 88.5 or 99 or 100 or sometimes even more than 100. These are not globally accepted. It's not even accepted in our universities, in Indian universities or in our institutions. So don't get carried away by these numbers. The only organization which can give you a Clarivate Analytica is the organization which can give you the impact factor. And not many of our Indian journals are into this impact factor categories, including our prosthodontic journals. So it takes a time for us to get into these organizations for the official impact factor. I'm talking in terms of general dentistry as well. Not many of our journals are recognized by these organizations for impact factors. It might take some time for us to get into this board. Next is the Medline. Medline is more in terms of, as similar to the PubMed, it is more in terms of the digital database is going to be your PubMed, and the organization which gives you indexing of recognition is going to be the Medline. It's more of a National Library of America Medicine, which recognize your journal as a standard journal, and they give you in terms of these recognitions. The other data like SH, SJR, SNP, SiteScore. SiteScore is synonymous to an impact factor. Of course, it's been given by an organization or a different organization that has been handled, that is by Scope Elsevier. It's almost similar to that of Clarivate Analytica, but still the university or the international academic environment does not recognize as an official impact factor organizations. There is some kind of issues that's been between these organizations, so they happen to come out with your own impact factor ratings. So globally accepted impact factor is only by the Clarivate Analytica. Something similar to that is going to be recognized as by the SiteScore, which has been promoted and given by Elsevier. And of course, you have Scopus, similar to your Medline. Scopus has been widely accepted by many Indian universities, but it's less impactful compared to your Medlines. The other scores like engagement factor score, H index, or more in terms of rating your authors. It's more in terms of checking in terms of the research metrics of the authors. I'm not going in detail about it. It's slightly complicated for a beginner to understand. And this is the factor in which we look into it. The moment you submit your manuscript, it comes to the editorial board and we look in terms of the manuscript files. So here is the process which starts delaying your manuscript. Every journal has got its own way of regulations structured and listed in their websites. It's mandatory that you go in terms of these regulations and structure your manuscript files accordingly. It starts with your title page. Of course, everyone knows what is the title page. I'm not going in detail about it, but these contents of the title page are important, like title of the article, category, running article titles. Maybe for an author, it's going to be just one article. For me, when we sit in the editorial board, it's going to be at least minimum of 5 to 6 articles submitted in a day. So we want all this information intact, so that it will be available for us at any moment of time in case we want certain things to be obtained for our data, for our journal working administrative activity. We need all these informations. So these are mandatory. In case these informations are not present in your title page or according to the journal's instructions, we send it back to the authors. So again, the process is going to get delayed. It might take a week's time. Say, for example, the process when you submit to the Journal of Indian Prosthodontics Society, I take at least 3 days for me to respond to the initial submissions that has been made, like for technical check or whatever the data has been analyzed. So it takes 3 days for me to check. And when I give it back to you guys, again, it's going to take at least a week for you to resubmit back for the technical verifications, which I have asked for it. So see that all this data is intact. For this small errors that you make in, it's going to delay your process of publications, or at least for a week. So these things are important. I'll tell you why these are important. Word count. People blindly add up word count in terms of the manuscript contents. Say if there's a specifications, each journal has got its specification. They ask you to include the abstracts in the word count. They don't ask you to include the abstracts in the word count. So all these are important for me to check whether whatever you uploaded files is going to be almost similar to the data that is available for me. Sometimes during your uploads, you might lose the data, especially in terms of the figures or tables, where we might lose on the data. In such situations, we just keep a cross verifications whether whatever that has been available, whatever the author intended to publish or upload is available with us. So these word counts are very useful for us to cross check, especially for the technical team, whether the required information which the author wants to give it to the editorial board has been intact and valid. That's the simplest thought, but that plays a great role in terms of our technical verifications. Next is the conflict of interest statement. This is the major issues that's been happening across, especially in India, where the demand of publication is going to increase. The conflicts of interest statement is mandatory. You have every journal as its own conflicts of interest statement. Maybe it's a template that is available, which has to be downloaded and signed by all the co-author and co-authors. It helps in terms of making it clear in terms of the funding that you happen to obtain, sponsorships, facilities used in certain organizations, and commercial interest, because there are a lot of articles which has been driven by the commercial interest, especially in terms of the materials and certain things in terms of influencing the clinical aspects of prosthodontics. So unless until the author declares this conflict of interest statement, it's not wrong that you have some conflicts, but it has to be declared. If at all it is declared, it's very easy for us to process the manuscripts, or else we have to wait till the things have been cleared. The major issues arises, if this is not done, major issue arises at the final stages when the manuscript has been published. That moment, there will be one organization claiming that, no, this is part of my institute. The facilities has been used by from our college, but the author is not acknowledged or given the credits to the institute or in terms of the materials. So to avoid all these issues, and finally it goes for the retractions, which will be a utter loss of time and energy for all of us, including the authors as well as in the journal team. Additionally, the retraction is going to kill our processing times. It puts the journal in the bad shape, and it consumes a lot of energy from us, where we have to communicate to various organizations to say that, no, this is be retracted, and it hurts the author to greater extents. So it's better to declare your conflicts of interest statement and make it available to the editorial board before when you upload your manuscripts. Illustrations and tables, which is the commonest errors which even I used to make. For example, there's one standard journal. I can give you the Journal of Prosthodontic Dentistry. It asks for images for at least minimum of 4 MB. That is the capacity in which they look for the quality. They expect you to upload a picture which is minimum of 4 MB. But majority of our Indian journals were taking the images within 4 MB. Even if there are journals which takes 10 images within 4 MB, there's a lot of differences. So when you think in terms of high quality journals, they expect you to submit a good quality pictures in a definitive file format. Say it's JPEG or JPG or JPEG or TIFF format. So you have to be very specific in terms of the type of images or the type of tables. There are a few journals which ask for a definitive design of your tables as well. So this is mandatory that you do it. And there are journals which ask for uploading the tables along with your manuscript as well as in terms of separately as a different table files. So these are the specifications which you have to look into, take care in when you upload your manuscripts. These are important technical considerations from the journal point of, from our technical side. We have to cross-check all these data so that once it is satisfactory, then we move on to the next phase process. Maybe you might wonder why we are so particular about it. For example, if you are giving us a table separately, when I convert it into a PDF format and send it to the reviewer, it may not get attached. So it depends on the software in which we work on. There are few softwares which can automatically link the individual files, non-blinded files, certain files of blinded files alone it will consider. So this is going to be more important. Additionally, the images can also be looped and tables can also be looped. So just to distinguish, it depends on the software in which the journal works. It's mandatory for us to abide by the journal regulations and give the data accordingly. Double spacing of your manuscript preparations. Maybe it sounds tricky and childish when I speak about this. This is more or less almost all journals ask for double spacing of your word text file, but majority of us don't submit it. This is going to delay the process. The reason of we asking for it is easy for the reviewer to evaluate it, especially when it gets converted to the PDF file, which is only a single spacing. It's difficult for the reviewer to read. One, that is the simplest thought. Next, in case he wants to identify the point saying, no, this is the line is going to be an issue, say the line number 35 in the left-hand side or line number 20 in the right-hand side. Easy for the reviewer to evaluate and give you the comments. Or in case you want to add on some comments, it's easy for him to add on in terms of in between the double spacing that is been available. Unfortunately, many of us don't do it. Automatically, the editorial boards will send back to the authors saying that this is not according to the journal instructions. Blinding of the manuscript is mandatory. Of course, you know what is blinding. It has to be impartial in way of reviewing the articles. So if at all you display your name, or most of us don't display our name because we become professional, but by mistakes, we might say that we have recruited a patient from this college, AB Shetty college. So automatically that reflects that it hurts on the blinding aspect of the manuscript. So go in detail in terms of the blinding the manuscript. These are the parameters, things which minor issues that happen in terms of the manuscript preparations. Fonts, maybe there are a lot of decorative fonts that is available, but most of our journals ask for either Times New Roman or Arial font. And again, in terms of the Word document, it's going to be MS Word document. Since majority of us have Apples, we might use Pages, but there are a lot of journals which accept Pages as well. These things in this formatting of your manuscript or structuring the manuscript, which Dr. Pragati is going to speak in detail in terms of the IMBAT format, how it has been there. So these format, whatever the format which the journal asks for in terms of structuring your original article or case, everything has got its guidelines in the way it has to be structured. If at all I ask for an IMBAT format, the journal is asking for an IMBAT format, you're supposed to follow the IMBAT format. What happens is there are a few journals which totally deviate from the regular formats. So when you change from one journal to other and resubmit to the other journal, we by mistakenly or carelessly submit the same format of the older journal, but the other journal might have a different format. So the moment the technical team of the editorial board looks in, they'll send it back to you. They can even reject the manuscript because that shows that the amount of focus or the concern you have in terms of that journal. So it's be particular about your formatting of your manuscript and structuring of the manuscript. And to the beginners who doesn't know what is IMBAT, it's the introduction, methodology, research and discussion, results and discussions. As I was discussing the conflict of interest statement, the same thing appears in the acknowledgements. These are specifically listed in your title page, especially in terms of acknowledgements. With the competition across the globe, where each person is helping the other researcher in terms of the finances or technical support or in terms of the writing supports, all these people have to be acknowledged. Tomorrow, when these people raise issues, once the article is published, it can lead to a lot of confusions among the authors as well as among the editorial board members. So see that all the contributors are listed and duly acknowledged. And this has to be mentioned in the title page. Majority of our Indian journals ask for in terms of the acknowledgements in the title page. This is quite critical and confusing, especially the majority of us get stuck in these activities when you go for the high impact journals. Please understand the differences in the grammar and differences in the English that is available in our Word document. If at all you're submitting a US journals, it has to be in US format. Correct your grammar, the English format to US English. You cannot submit to the UK English or Indian English. There's a lot of difference. If at all you want to find out the difference, type a text and change the format of your Word document to UK or Indian English. It's in Indian English, it doesn't pick up many of your grammatical errors. If it's going to be US, there's a lot of difference between the UK English and Indian English and the US English and Indian English. So if it's going to be in a journal that's going to be where you're going to submit to the Indian journals, then Indian English is fine. But if you want to your articles to be accepted in the UK countries or US countries, it's up to you to change. The simplest thing is to change the formatting there and check for the grammatical errors that has been happening. And English is also different. Majority of your international journals go for past present tense. Our Indian journals go for past tense. We call it active tense or past tense. It depends upon the journal and the format in which they look for. We have a lot of softwares to help you in terms of checking this or correcting this, or we also have technical writers to help you in terms of writing or structuring your manuscripts. It's up to the authors. Nothing is going to be available free. You want some good quality activity that has to be structured, you have to pay for it. File uploads. This is the commonest error that happens. There's provisions where you have single uploads or individual file uploads in your journals, in your journal websites. So most of the Elsevier journals help you, advanced Elsevier journals give you in terms of the facility of single file upload. That is, you have in terms of your title page, major Word document, the pictures, grammar, pictures, drafts, everything as individual files, and you can make it as a one file and upload it. The software will help in terms of segregating according to the needs. Whereas most of our Indian journals will have individual files upload system. That is, you have to have a Word document for your manuscript, your abstract has to be separate, your title page has to be separate, your copyright statements has to be separate, or your conflict of interest statement has to be separate. So it depends upon the journal. Look in terms of what type of files they ask for, what type of documents they request for. Accordingly, you can structure your documents so it will save a lot of time from your end and from the journal end. If at all there's people ask for a single file upload, you have to be extra careful in terms of differentiating these documents in your single files, so easy for the software to capture it, or else it's going to delay the process. So many times what the author thinks the file has been uploaded, but it would have not reached the editorial board. Unless you get an acknowledgement from the editorial board saying that it has been accepted by the journal for submission, unless and until you get this emails, take it for granted, it's not been gone into our systems. So since it's more of digital kind of activities, we might think the moment we upload, it has been taken up by the editorial board. Unless you complete all the formalities, it is not going to be accepted by the editorial board for review. So recheck on the final manuscripts files, whatever according to the instruction of journals. Ask the co-authors to recheck in terms of your documents, which is the easiest way for us to re-verify your documents, because each journal has got its own documentation systems. So when we have another person checking in terms of the documentation system, it eases out our time processing, and we might lose certain things in terms of our fatigue errors, which can be corrected if another person looks into it. So the basic things is in terms of the title page, manuscript files, tables and figures, copyright forms, cover letters, and the most important, the supplementary forms. The IEC IRB certificate is mandatory for all your articles now. Either if it's going to be in vitro studies or in vivo studies, we ask for IRB and IEC certificates. These are mandatory for the regulatory bodies which assess the journals. So we have to give our IRB and IEC numbers. If at all you don't have it, please get it done before you submit your manuscripts so that it prevents the delay in terms of your processing of your manuscripts. And of course, clinical trial numbers, which becomes mandatory in almost all clinical researchers now. Down the lane, if at all you don't have a clinical trial registers, you may not be in a position to upload your clinical research. So scripting of the manuscript, which is going to be dealt in detail by Dr. Pragati. For me, as when you submit your documents, each type of manuscript has got its own list of things which we are, or components which we like to look into it. So like title, abstract, keywords, introductions, methodology, results, discussion, tables, legend, and figures and illustration. Each journal has got its own format. Most of the journals have the similar format because we are totally guided by the International Council of Journal of Medical Editors. So these are structured formats for each type of article, like original article or case reports and reviews. So look into that and structure your manuscript. Of course, in detail about how to write a title, how to structure the abstract, what are the keywords, how to go on with the keywords. I think Dr. Pragati will speak in detail about it. When we talk in terms of fast tracking, now all this time I was talking in terms of the document uploads, now it's going to delay your processing, and why we happen to look in terms of needs in which we happen to look in terms of why on these document uploads. Next is in terms of research. It basically depends on your type, design of your research, and of course the guidelines. If it's going to be a clinical research, take it for granted. You have a high value or demand for your clinical research. Majority of the journals will consider that in terms of the priority and start publishing your articles. Of late, we happen to do a lot of competitions in terms of the clinical research because it's the highest level of evidences. So we like to push, especially for prosthodontics, we have totally depend on clinical because we lack a lot of clinical researchers. We appreciate more clinical researchers, especially high impact clinical researchers like your RCTs. So if at all you have done an RCT, majority of the journals will give you a priority in terms of publishing it. And look into the designs in which it has been structured by your manuscript. There are certain guidelines in which you are supposed to follow, and that is mandatory to follow. So thinking about the evidences, RCT and systematic review and meta-analysis is going to be the topmost priority for any journal to publish. So if at all you structure your research or paper according to this, RCT and meta-analysis, the highest priority has been given in terms of publishing it. So you might have a greater chances, if at all you have followed your regulations appropriately, there's going to be a greater chances that your RCT and meta-analysis can be easily published compared to your in vitro studies. The next comes is in terms of your cohort studies, systematic review of cohort studies, case control and in vitro studies, and case reports, editorials, reviews. Majority of us have a habit of writing a narrative review, which is just an extension of your seminars. The impact of it is going to be lesser. So not many standard journals may not appreciate in terms of narrative reviews, but most of the journals accept systematic reviews. And if at all is going to be meta-analysis, and if it's done and structured properly, you can get the acceptance at the earliest phase from the journals. Guidelines, the moment you submit the manuscript, of course, the technical team is going to look in terms of all the technical files. The next, when someone in terms of the associate editors or section editors or editor is going to look in terms of your manuscript, they're going to look onto these guidelines. The guidelines, if at all you're done in RCT, we follow consort guidelines. That is the most standardized guidelines. These are the minimal requirements from the guidelines. If at all you add on more data to the guidelines, it's more appreciated. But these are minimal requirements or mandated requirement for that particular studies. If it's going to be non-randomized trials, it's a trend statement. Systematic reviews and meta-analysis is going to be Prisma or Cochrane. Case report is going to be CARE guidelines. Epidermal observational studies, it's going to be STOPE guidelines. Genetic studies, it's going to STREGA. Quality studies is SRQR. And diagnostic studies is going to be STARD. And animal experiments going to be ARRIVE. Dr. Pragati will give you again in terms of where to look for these guidelines. You can just type these keywords in the search engines and you will get the standard agencies giving you all these guidelines. Again, she'll give you in terms of the easier ways to, or the more standard bodies where you can download, or standard website from where you can download all these guidelines. The issue arises in vitro studies, especially with your prosthodontic environment as well as in the conservative dentistry environment, because majority of us go in terms of in vitro study designs. Of course, we don't have any standard guidelines for in vitro studies. There are some simulatory guidelines proposed by various authors or agencies in simulation to your RCT RCT guidelines or non-RCT guidelines, but these are not acceptable. Let us be realistic. So those are not practically possible in terms of adapting those guidelines. So there are people, research groups who are working in terms of to standardize its guidelines. What majorly we do, or what my side, what I look in terms of in vitro studies, if at all is going to be material testing, so I look in terms of ISO and ASI standard guidelines, that is standardization of the specimen or the size of the specimens. Mind you that ISO also gives you in terms of the numbers of samples that has to be tested for each composite samples that we make. Say, for example, you're testing for your frictional strength of your acrylic. The minimal requirement is that you have to test at least 5 samples for a particular compositions. Again, if you go in terms of the research domain, in terms of the power of study or impact of the study, you have a definitive way of calculating your sample sizes. So don't just take it for granted that 5 is the number of samples given by the ISO, or 10 is the number of samples given by the ISO or NSI, and you restrict out of 10, you just do 1 sample and give the parameter. It automatically reflects on your statistics and the power and the impact, which majority of us do not know. When you get me a sample saying that a frictional strength is going to be 75 megapascals or for an polymethyl methacrylate resin, I immediately compare my standard values. So it should be closer to the standard values. Then you give the sample in which material it is made. Say for Indian material used some standard companies material. So I go into the material sheet of that material and I compare the control group of the values. So it's important the standardization has been done. And validity of your in vitro studies that can be obtained with your adapting this ISO or ANSI standard guidelines or some standard guidelines and the number of samples. Please also think about your clinical relevant endpoints, which is more important for in vitro studies. Limitations and validity is going to play a greater role in terms of in vitro studies. To avoid all this, you need all these parameters to be standards like your sampling, adaptational standards, the way it has been assessed and outcome measures. And majorly, we avoid describing the statistics, even that has to be taken care. And of course, the IRB registration is also mandatory for your in vitro studies. There's always confusions among the people that whether we need IRB or IEC registrations. Maybe we don't require IEC registrations for in vitro studies, ethical committee registration, but IRB registrations are mandatory, especially in the Indian environment. Almost all institutions have an IRB board. It's mandatory you get into that process and get your numbers for the abstracts checked. The reason is, simplest reason, it is reflects saying that some other body is evaluated for the standards. There's the reason why we look for the IRB registrations. From the journal point of view, we have to give the IRB or IEC numbers displayed in the manuscripts because we have been asked to do it by the regulatory authorities. If it's going to be a standard journal, definitely they'll ask for it. The major errors comes in your structuring of the manuscript is your references. Obviously, you know why the references or citations have been asked for. The normal address, what we do is we write one paragraph blindly, we take 4 or 5 articles and quote it. And these are becoming issues now of late because with the metric systems where every author or researcher has been evaluated for their research metrics, everyone is keen in terms of looking into this research metrics. So you cannot do it anymore saying that I blindly cite my own articles, others' articles without any standard references to that content of the text. So you include AMP references. When you include AMP references, maybe I'm not going in terms of the quotes and citations, but you have to know the system of references, which majorly differs with the journals. You have 2 systems, Harvard and Vancouver system. One is author year, the other one is author number. Author years, you write the author, and correspondingly, you write the year in terms of the body of the text, not in terms of the final bibliographies. Author number is in terms of you write the author, plus you have a superscript or some parentheses in which you will write the number of the references. The difference again, when you check in terms of the listing of the references, it is listed alphabetically, whereas in Vancouver system, it is listed in terms of the numerical number. It also varies in terms of journal full names and the abbreviations that is being used by the different systems. So do understand the differences, the major differences between Harvard and Vancouver, which is majorly followed in our dental journals. But again, even in Vancouver, which is widely accepted by majority of the journals, has its own differences. The Vancouver has said it's going to be your author number system. When you cite an article, it goes like this: the author name, the topic name, as well as in terms of your journal, year, volume, and the page number. There's a lot of difference. I've happened to give it in different colors. Each component is going to be significant. For example, Chandar NG, there's no full stop between my initials, the full name and surnames, first name and surnames. If at all you make that error, the software will not pick up in terms of evaluating your references. So that's the major issues. That's the reason why we insist on terms of forget about the final stages during your proofreading where you correct it. But if the reviewer wants to review it and the editor wants to review your articles, whether you happen to write the right references or quote the right references, the issue crops up here. Even you add a full stop or an endpoint over different parentheses, that's going to, the software will not pick up in terms of identifying your references. And the way it is used, I'll show you an example in terms of your references. These are the variations. You have it in the Vancouver system itself. Maybe I say it's Vancouver. Hope you appreciate this variations. One is with the full stop and a superscript. The parenthesis varies. It can be a square bracket, round bracket, and superscript with a square bracket, superscript with a round bracket. So these are the variations which each journal has its in terms of variations in terms of the Vancouver systems. So you might follow one system and you'll be happy in terms of saying, no, I followed the Vancouver system, why this editor is sending back the article or the technical team sending back the article. Which varies with the journal in terms of this. Additionally, you can also see where the full stop is there. It is ahead of superscript or away from the next to the superscript and the commas. So these are the small intricacies which you have to look in terms of the journal regulations and the manuscript regulations, and you have to structure your manuscript accordingly. These will avoid your processing times, so you can fasten your manuscript publication processing phase. And to avoid these confusions, you might have reference management systems like Mendeley, EndNote, Zotero. All this help. This software will help in terms of the management of references. My personal thought is these reference management systems will work out very well in terms of your systematic reviews or meta-analysis, but it may not work greatly in terms of your original researches, because the number of references you might have for original research articles can vary between anywhere between 30 to 40 references on average. It can be more or less, but 30 to 40 references is going to be an average. But the problem with this reference management systems is that all these data are uploaded to the cloud. Whatever, even if you, for example, you take one particular software and you use the systems, and you all this goes to their cloud web page, is their personal pages. So you might have to be a little bit careful, especially if you are a serious researcher. Your research ideas can go on faster, travel faster to the global community. So be careful in that. It's nothing wrong in using for original articles or case reports, but for original articles and case report, number of references are going to be lesser, so you can manage with it. But if it's going to be a systematic review, it's going to be, on average, it's going to be around 75 to 100 references. It's difficult for you to structure, manage, and add on all the input data in the structuring of the manuscript, which is going to consume a lot of time, which will delay your processing of your manuscripts. So in that situations, you use the reference management softwares. No harm in using it even for the original articles, but practically it may not require it. You may not require it. Authorships, always a concern. Everyone has been concerned, has issues in terms of authorships, especially with the growing competitions, need and demand in terms of the academic environment. First and foremost, see that you put up the right authors, names, especially because there's a confusion in our first name, surnames. The Indian systems of first name, surnames are different from the global environment. My name, this surname is reflected in terms of many of the metrics data rather than my first name, whereas here I'm called as Ngopi more commonly rather than Chandar, whereas in international environment I'm called as Chandar first rather than Ngopi. So the addressing system varies. So you have to put the right first name and second names. When it goes for the metric ratings, all this is going to be captured by your software. So it's important that you put your right names. If you're going to add Ngopi and Chandar, of course, it might differ in terms of your metric. It might take a lot more time for the software to analyze and get the right, give you the right credentials. Or you have to input it manually, which is going to complicate your times. So give your right credentials and right names so that it's easy for the softwares to pick up. It's totally automated, works with the artificial intelligence, especially your metric ratings. So you might lose on the impact. See that you put it right, address your names in the right directions in almost all the articles. And other issues, perhaps, is in terms of where the manuscript get delayed is in terms of authorships. Maybe initially you submit a manuscript, especially with the high quality journals, you feel that it takes a year for the manuscript to be processed. And after that, in case it gets accepted, then there's a fight among the authors in terms of the order and affiliation, in the order of the authorships, or who has to be there or who is not to be there. Or sometimes you tend to miss some author, he might come and fight for these authorships. So all this can be sorted before you structure your manuscripts. Structuring, I'm talking about before you start writing the manuscript so that you don't have any confusions, because writing and structuring consumes a lot of time. So if at all you want to give a ghost authorship to someone, or you want to gift an authorship to someone, not bad, but decide it before you structure the manuscript so that the entire team accepts to it, rather than at the final stages, because of these reasons of conflicts and the editor is pulling the manuscript, it's going to waste your time as well as the journalist's time. The simplest way of criteria is in terms of the contribution. That is the most acceptable thought process for the present generations. Earlier we have different thoughts, like giving all the credentials to the student, first authors in terms of student, or it was going from the levels of seniority in ascending or descending order. Now it totally goes in terms of the contributions, in terms of the concept, design of the study, analysis, the way the data, who the person was happened to obtain or acquire the data, drafting the article, and the final upload. So depends upon this criteria, you give the authorships and do it before you start structuring your manuscripts and designs. Any confusions in terms of all these guidelines, it's totally almost all standard journals are guided by this committee of editors, that is International Committee of Medical Journal Editors. We follow the guidelines of whatever that has been structured. We are forced to follow also. So everything has been provided by this committee, which is globally accepted, so that we don't deviate much. There are a few journals which are not adapted these guidelines, so there's minor variations in terms of few journals guidelines. But if at all you want your journal to be highly impactful, these guidelines have to be adapted and followed by all the journals. The concerns is in terms of the ethics is a major concern of late, because with demand and pressure, the public, especially in terms of the fast tracking the publications, we bypass the ethical committee boards, go for a weaker boards and get your approvals. This happens especially with your clinical researchers. But what happens down the lane is, if at all there's going to be faulty in terms of your research, it has a major impact in terms of your credentials, especially your credentials, the team's credentials, and the institution credentials. So don't bypass all these ethical concerns. Morally, it is only one ethics. You know what is right, what is wrong. Individually, people know about it. Maybe I can go and deliberate in terms of individual aspects of the research, like the way it has been conducted of the study, participation recruitment, or simple in terms of in vitro studies. Out of 10 samples, I do just do one sample, get the data, manipulate it, magnify it, and for the 10 samples and give the data. You know it is wrong, but it can be easily captured from our end, especially when we evaluate it in terms of statistical analysis. So ethics is common. It's easier way to differentiate is to, you know what is right, what is wrong, go in the right directions. It can involve in terms of statistics, it can involve in terms of the fabrication of the pictures, data, or citations. We can deliberate a lot in terms of ethics. We can speak a more extensive lectures. We have boards and organizations which are more concerned about the ethics. But as a beginner or even advanced practitioners, research practitioners, I expect you to abide by the ethical principles. The simplest is to differentiate between ethics, right and the wrong in your own means. Now, it's, as said, we have a lot of organizations coming up in terms of the ethical regulations. We have a National Dental Bioethic Board. We have a UNESCO board. Of course, the Indian Prosthodontics Society is associated with all these boards. We have a separate chapter coming in terms of dental bioethics. Of course, these are textbook chapters, but the chapter here is to regulate the research and the publications that has been happening in India. So be careful. Just because you want to fast track your publications or sending it to the predatory journals and getting it accepted doesn't mean that you will be away from these ethical activities. So see that you abide by the ethical regulations, Of course, they can give you a lot of textbook literatures to say that what is ethical, what is not ethical. The simplest thing is, what I believe is, accept what is good, don't go in the wrong path. One is in ethics, which is a major concern. Next is the plagiarism, which many are unaware of it, or many are ignorant on it. Ignorant means, I'm not saying that you may not know the word plagiarisms, or I'm not making you say that, I'm not trying to say that you don't know what is plagiarisms. But thing is, people fail to know what are the different types of plagiarisms and how it's going to affect your manuscripts. Technically, I can give you in terms of the different types of plagiarisms, text which is majorly known to majority of us. We know that we cannot copy a paragraph, we cannot copy a sentence and paste it in our own manuscripts. That is there, that is commonly known. But apart from that, you know, there are also plagiarism of ideas, plagiarism of images, mosaic, self-source plagiarisms, and differences between the others are more of theoretical, complete, and direct plagiarism. And this is a major concern, that's accidental and paraphrasing. Because we are influenced by our literatures, we read a lot of literatures, we feel that when we structure our sentences, by subconsciously we try to structure our sentences. It's not with deliberate things, because from the literature we might write certain things. As for the simplest thing is the GPT definitions. The moment we start with something, we start with the GPT definitions, but we have to give due credentials to the GPT definitions as well. Either you have to follow the rules and give them the credentials, or see that you avoid those definitions, put it, restructure it in a different way. The other one is the paraphrasing. The moment I say restructuring, you go many of us paraphrase the definitions. When you do a paraphrasing, especially with the softwares, be careful. Again, it can give you more of simulations. It's just not blindly putting in the software and taking it out and adding to your manuscript files. It might lead to a plagiarized text in a different directions. Be careful in terms of paraphrasings that happens, that's done by the commercial softwares. To identify plagiarisms, we have a lot of experts. The experts in the field can easily identify the plagiarized text. And of course, many of us use electronic plagiarism checkers to identify it. All these are guided by the COPE guidelines, which is a mandatory guideline which all standard journals have to abide. And if at all there's going to be plagiarism that can affect a lot of us in many aspects, right from retraction to the ban in terms of the publications. The commonest checkers which used for is, of course, can be differentiated into free softwares and paid. For publications, we prefer to use an Nitte because it's more acceptable globally in terms of identifying the plagiarisms. Of course, you have different softwares ranging from free to subscription software like Turnitin, which is majorly used in universities to identify your dissertations, plagiarisms in dissertations. You have source analysis, plagiarism checker, Grammarly, small SEO, EV2, and many more. I tell you the differences, what happens in terms of your free and paid softwares. Don't go, because it's free, it doesn't mean that everything is going to be done in terms of the scientific way. You can go to their services boxes and check in depth. You can see that what are the difference between the free and paid softwares. Even if it is available free in the same software, it's available free, you can understand the differences. In-depth grammar analysis, comprehensive check, language check. So blindly don't get into the trap of free softwares. It can give you issues down the lane. So you might complain to the editor saying, "Not I have checked with this software, but there's a lot of differences." Everything is whatever. If at all you want a good check, it cannot be done freely. As said, risk of plagiarisms, because you want immediate publications, copying a text, which was happening down the lane earlier the last few years. People are just copying and pasting text, and copying and pasting text alone doesn't amount for plagiarism. Even if you say that you copy 4 or 5 words together, it can lead to a plagiarisms. So it leads to ban of publishing in future, and more important, it's the loss of dignity or membership in your prominent societies. So editorial procedure. Each journal has got its own phase of work. Like the moment you submit your manuscript, the initial technical check, to responses from the authors and reviewers, we have our own timeline in which we work. So go get into the timeline activities of the journal. Almost all journals, standard journals, gives you the timeline of activities. So if at all you are really in a hurry to get your article published, this timeline can give you a rough idea in which it's going to tell you a rough idea in terms of amount of time that is going to be consumed in terms of your publication process. So accordingly, you can plan your activities. And most of the journals works in the online domain. So everything is going to be, you can easily track the process of your manuscripts, at what stage it is in, either it's in the reviewer stage or in the editorial board stage. Everything can be tracked with your softwares. The beginners, it goes like this. The moment you start submit your article, it goes for the plagiarism check. Then for reviewing, it can get accepted or rejected at any of these phases. Then goes, if at all is accepted, goes for technical editing, then author proofing, early online, public, and the articles get published. So these three phases, that is the initial submission to the plagiarism check and reviewing, consumes a lot of time, say for 2 to 3 months. They can reject an article immediately. That happens with many of the standard journals. But if at all, if the author feels or editor feels that no, it has some valuable content and can be sent for reviewing, it consumes a lot of time. So there's no short track process in this. You want your articles to be accepted, or immediately you want all this data. This is the most important things in which the editorial board looks at. That is a novelty. It should be new. A study design, if at all you say an RCT, the RCT study design has to be adapted and followed. That is going to be very critical in terms of almost all journals. They look in terms of the standard study designs and guidelines, and also discuss in terms of the impact. If at all it's an RCT, you have greater priorities. The decisions totally depend on this priority because it also influences our journal on the long run. Completeness in terms of your manuscript file that is going to be uploaded, and major concerns of ethics and plagiarism is going to influence the decision on your articles. To sum up, these are the aspects in which I was thinking in terms of fast tracking your manuscripts. Fast tracking doesn't mean overnight publications. Fast tracking here means in terms of the amount of time consumed is going to be lessened if at all you follow and abide the guidelines. One is in terms of your research design and type, where I discussed in terms of the different guidelines and adaptation of these guidelines, and whatever type of research is going to be given a higher priority. Manuscript preparations, right from your font, right, in terms of the spacing, all type of images that's going to be uploaded, the need of images and tables, files, all that is being described in terms of manuscript preparations. It also involves references, but I did explain to you in different parameters, references, especially in terms of the Harvard, Vancouver, differences in the Vancouver systems. So many of us make a mistakes by copying the text from the general software domain and paste it, but there are minor variations in which the journal looks in. Of course, the serious issues in terms of the plagiarisms, ethics, and authorships, which has to be resolved before you submit your manuscripts. Target journal, that's going to be a major consideration because majority of time we blindly submit the article which may not fit into the theme of the journal. And manuscript preparations, I think Dr. Pragati will give you in detail in terms of the manuscript preparation, the scripting of the manuscript, in terms of the thoughts in which how to structure your title, how to structure your introduction, how to structure your methodology. All that is going to be detailed in detail. She is going to describe about in the upcoming lecture. Thank you for one and all for your patient listening. I'd like to thank the Department of Prosthodontics from AB Shetty, of course, the management of the AB Shetty that includes the principal, all the delegates who have been patiently listening. Majority of my pictures have been obtained from the various web resources. I do also acknowledge the all the resources from which I happen to copy or plagiarize my text. That's nothing new from my side. Any queries, you can text it in the chat box, or if it all is away from during this lecture time, you can email it. Thank you one and all.
Congratulations, Ngopi, for your in-depth presentations. I hope all my colleagues have benefited from that. I have few questions, Ngopi. The most of the reviewer comments usually, your title is vague, your study design has to change. Is it possible for us to change this since we already received ethical clearance for the same topic title?
Yeah. See, when you go for your research approvals from the IRB or IEC, the way the IRB or IEC looks at your research topics is different. They might ask you in terms of various parameters in which they have to look at. But when it comes to the journal publishing, we want it as more short and crisp. The simplest thing is, for example, is your flexural test evaluation. That is commonly done in Prosthodontics. I'll say that I evaluated the first test of acrylic has been evaluated. The blah, blah, blah technique. But when it comes to IEC, they'll be looking in terms of these parameters. When it comes to the publication, I have an additional parameter of plagiarism. So this reflects in the plagiarism here. So I have to change the title here. If at all the IEC IRB checks it in terms of plagiarism, they may not have issues. You will be changing it there itself. But when it comes to the publication, there's issues in terms of the plagiarism. So most of the journals will ask in terms of changing the title. They prefer to have a shorter title compared to your other detailed title which you give in IRB or IEC for you when you obtain for IRB or IEC approval. The next thing you have been asking something apart from the title, then what is it?
Study design.
Sorry? Study design.
Yeah.
Study design, the issue thing is we make it very clear in terms of the guidelines. These are the guidelines. I think Dr. Pragati will give you the places from where you can adapt the guidelines. These guidelines are the minimal guidelines. There are some situations, for example, in prosthodontics, even before this lecture, I was speaking to Dr. Pragati in terms of RCTs. It's very difficult to do an RCT in prosthodontics because it's difficult to standardize your patients, especially in your inclusion criteria. Of course, of late, there are some leeways given by IRB and IECs in various institutions to just blindly go on with your studies. But this can be very impactful when the article gets published. In that reasons, we might request you to redesign your study or follow these standardized guidelines. It also happens issues in terms of your in vitro studies. We don't have anything called a standard guidelines. So there issues starts with your sample size evaluations and in terms of your ISO guidelines or ANSI guidelines. Most of us follow an older guidelines of ISOs, say for 2011 or 2013. There are still few literatures where a few manuscripts where I get to follow 99 guidelines. So it's mandatory that you follow the latest guidelines. Say it's 2021, maybe 3 years ahead, you would have done your study. It should be somewhere between 2015 to 2018 guidelines. So there the issue crops up in terms of study designs. So these are the major concerns from our side. Of course, there might be a few minor issues that can happen by mistakes from both sides, either from the author as well as from the editor side. That can happen. So these are the concerns which we have in terms of the title or study designs.
Regarding sample size, usually sometimes the reviewer says the sample size is too small. But since the study is already done with that sample size, so what should be our reply to that?
Sample sizes, if at all we go in terms of type of study designs, it has a different way of evaluating. The study design, the sample size evaluation for an RCT is different, for an observation study is different, and the various types of observation study it is different. We have to calculate in accordance to the sample size parameters, which the statistician can help you out, or we can also use it with your online calculators, which is an easier way to do it. But on the other side, it also depends on the impact of your research. Say, if at all there's some study which is already done, you take those data, you add on to in terms of sample size calculations. Say, for example, I'm doing an RCT on a posterior palatal seal. There would have been a study which I would have done on 20 patients. That would have been, when I add it here, maybe on statistician's perceptions, he might say 25 patients might be idle with calculating using those formulas. But when in terms of the research aspects, the impact of research is going to be greater with higher sample sizes. Higher sample size doesn't mean I have to magnify it just for the impact requirements, but you have to be more specific about your study design and calculate your sample sizes accordingly. In vitro studies, the major concern is because majority of us don't look in terms of the research impact. We just blindly go in terms of number sizes, which is going to be damaging in terms of your impact of your research. In that way, we have to alter your sample sizes. I think all this, Dr. Pragati might also give you a lead when she's going to speak on terms of structuring the manuscripts. These are the reasons in which we think in terms of the lesser sample sizes or higher sample sizes. There are situations where, for example, in surgical sites where you do a lot of patients working on the carcinomas. I cannot expect in terms of 100 patients because my sample size and the impact design is going to be like that. I cannot ask for it because it leads to other ethical issues. So you calculate using your sample size formulas. whatever number you get, you justify it. If at all you don't have that, then the issue pops up.
Okay. So justification that matters there.
Yeah.
Okay. There's one more question is regarding the scoping review. How likely are the journals to accept this?
Standard journals will not take up the scoping review. Let us be realistic about it. Scoping review is just below, just slightly above your narrative review and below your systematic review. It just give you a brief idea. Scoping reviews are normally done during your PhD work to identify the literature domain and help in terms of directing your thoughts in terms of that focused area. So it doesn't give an impact. To be more honest enough, the scoping reviews or narrative reviews doesn't give major impact for the journal. At the end of the day, like how the author metrics are evaluated, the same way journal metrics are evaluated. Say if my article is getting cited by 10 people, then it's going to be impactful. The same thing, the journal also will expect the same thing. The journal article has to be reflected in 10 citations at least, so that my metrics improve it. So more of standard journals will not accept scoping reviews because scoping reviews are less impactful in terms of citations.
Thank you, Gopi,
My
for
pleasure, Dr. Manoj.
clarifying all these doubts. I request Dr. Chetan Nitte to take over from me.
Thank you, Dr. Gopi Chandra, for your time, for your most valuable time, I would like to say, and for sharing your knowledge with regards to fast-tracking research publications. You made it very clear. What do you mean by fast-tracking? Where should our emphasis be with regards to bringing out good publication at a relatively in order to speed up our publications. We would like to continue our association with you, Gopi, over the time of period. Thank you very much once again for having spent your time. We would look forward for more deliberations. We'll be sending across our certificate of appreciation for your participation today. Thank you. Moving on to our.
Thank you, sir. It's my pleasure.
Moving on to our next presenter. Dr. Pragati. He will be speaking on manuscript writing. May I invite Dr. Nirupama to introduce today's speaker. Let me invite Dr. Nirupama, who is faculty at the Department of Prosthodontics. Over to you, Dr. Nirupama.
Thank you, sir. Good morning, one and all. I have a pleasure of introducing Dr. Pragati Kaurani, who is speaking on scientific manuscript writing. So Dr. Pragati has completed an MDS in Prosthodontics from Bharatiya Vidyapeeth Dental College, Pune in 2006 and is currently pursuing her PhD in Prosthodontics. She's been working with Mahatma Gandhi Dental College and Hospital, Jaipur since 2007. She has authored a book on research methodology in dentistry and has several publications to her credit and has authored chapters in books. She has been invited as a guest speaker at various national conferences and has conducted courses on research methodology. Recently, her research on nanoparticles in denture-based resins has received a research grant from the Department of Biotechnology, Government of India. She is a reviewer in the Journal of Indian Prosthodontic Society, International Journal of Dental Sciences, Associate Editor at the Enviro Dental Journal, and a guest editor at the Frontiers of Oral Health. I hereby welcome Dr. Pragati Kaurani to deliver a lecture on scientific manuscript writing. Welcome, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Over to you, ma'am.
Are you able to see my screen, ma'am?
Yes.
Thank you, ma'am. Good morning to one and all. Warm greetings from the Pink City, Jaipur. To begin with, I would like to thank the organizing committee of Department of Prosthodontics of the AB Shetty Dental College for giving me this opportunity to share my views. My special gratitude to Dr. Chetan Hegde for considering me, for giving this opportunity to me. Well, this presentation is basically an amalgamation of my experiences and the way I look at it when I understand the whole journey of writing a scientific manuscript. And when I begin, I always think about this movie. And if you people haven't gone and seen this, you must see this movie. It's a brilliant movie called The Einstein and Eddington. What makes it relevant in my topic is that it revolves around a research paper, which was written by Einstein, found by Eddington, and it finally led to prove that Newton's theory was wrong and Einstein's theory was right. In fact, these two researchers were sitting in two different parts of the world around World War I, and they were in countries which were at war against each other. But it was the scientific paper which was published, which brought the two together and brought about this discovery in science like never before. So that is the power of a published paper. Now, we would all believe that the science of publishing or writing is static. You know, one can talk the same things over and over again. But just like anything else in dentistry, even scientific manuscript writing is very dynamic and changing as we speak. Just like digital prosthodontics or digital dentistry has invaded and we need to catch up with the pulse, the same thing is happening in the science of manuscript writing. It is evolving as and when we speak with time. So to just name a few, today we have several guidelines which we need to follow. We have several softwares which help you to conduct secondary researches. In fact, very recently now there is a software which has been launched which can help you to do a systematic review in 2 weeks. It is called as 2-week systematic review, in fact. Now you need to submit abstracts which can be graphical. You need to submit, there are papers which are video papers which are indexed in PubMed. And here the publishers actually come to you with their cameras and shoot. You do an entire video shoot of your research work and it gets published. We can publish our pilot studies. We can publish our study protocols. We can publish before publishing, which is called as preprint publishing. There's a concept of open access. There's a concept of open sharing. So there is much more to scientific writing than simple introduction, material methods, research output, etc. So therefore, in that context, we need to speak much more. Now, at the offset, when we write an article and it gets accepted, we are very, very happy. Of course, that joy is beyond anything that one can imagine. So we feel we've done our bit, we've accomplished it, a journey which was probably a 2 years journey where you did your research, it got accepted, and you think that this is the end of it. But you'd be surprised that it's actually not the end of it at all. There is a lot of things that are happening even after the sense of publishing. And this is happening because of this entire fight of citation. And it's very serious in countries outside ours, where citations and your indices of researchers determine their salaries, their incentives, and things like that. So there is a lot of things that are happening beyond just the acceptance of the paper. There is amount of how many people are reading it, how many people are citing it, how many people are downloading it, who is talking about it. Is it mentioned in Twitter? Is it mentioned on Facebook? Is it being shown on social media? What's the altmetric score of your research paper? So what I'm trying to get to is that writing a scientific manuscript has a very different definition in today's digital world. It means that not just your content has to be very, very good, the quality that you are putting into your content, what you're writing and how you're writing has to be extremely challenging and very, very up to date in today's date. So if I stick to the basic, though IMRAD is the backbone of any scientific paper, and I will be talking about it in in extensive detail, but just sticking to IMRAD in today's date, when you're talking about this manuscript writing, is a little obsolete. You need to go a little beyond that. So let's look at it in a very different perspective. So my topic is scientific manuscript writing, and I'll try to decipher each one words that come here. The first thing is the writing part. And this I realized because, writing is English writing as Indians is not too difficult because we are taught English language very seriously as we grow up. And we are made to read these books, write essays, write letters, write comprehension. So we have a set pattern of thinking when we start writing. And this is what we understand as writing. But it completely takes a spin because scientific writing is not the same as the fiction writing that we understand. So even if you have the skill of writing, even if you were to publish it, but you didn't have the skill of writing, you would have still perished. So writing is not just any English writing. The term is very specific. It is scientific writing. And how does this become very different from what we understand as English writing? That's because here we have to show something which can be repeated by someone, whoever wants to repeat it. You find a research question, you revolve around the research question, you use some formulas, some statistics to approve or disapprove, you quote facts, you state work which was done by someone before, you agree or disagree with something that they had done, you find something new, you also find some issues with your own work. So this is the concept of scientific writing. Here we are not writing experiences, floral languages, or anything that I feel. And so the concept of scientific manuscript writing is different from the understanding of writing we have grown up with. And therefore, it's not wrong to say that it is a learned skill. Nobody is born with it. And you need to, over a period of time, train yourself to understand and catch the pulse of this scientific writing. So when you are doing this publication process, there are two parts to it, and each one of them has an extreme importance in the acceptance, publications, and citations in a very good journal. The first and foremost is the strong, robust research methodology. Sir has already spoken a lot about it. So you definitely cannot go wrong there. If it is a randomized controlled trial, it has to follow the rules of randomized controlled trial. So you need to have a very strong base of research methodology to begin with. The second part is the scientific writing. That itself has to be very, very strong. So my topic starts from the point in which your research is done, and now you're looking up to publishing it and writing it down using the scientific writing principles. The manuscript is anything that is handwritten or typed text, but not published as of now. And the Equator website gives you these guidelines. I'll talk slightly in detail a little later. So this gives you an idea that there are so many types of articles which can be written. And each one of them has their own rules and regulations, or rather guidelines, which can be downloaded, used, and they form as a template for us to write. Since even though there are a lot of them, we will just restrict ourselves to original research articles when I'm talking about the scientific manuscript writing. So this is to show you the different types of articles that are there, and these guidelines keep getting updated very regularly. So you need to go to this Equator website and then see the research that you're looking at, take the guideline, download the guideline, and then proceed from there. We'll see that slightly in detail a little later. The other thing that I would like to point out to when we start about manuscript writing, which is also slightly touched by Dr. Ngopi, is the concept of reverse engineering. Now, this is not very new to us as prosthodontists. We keep the end result in mind, and we go ahead planning our entire treatment plan following the end result. We do the same when we do manuscript writing. What we do here is we understand the end result first, and then go about writing the manuscript accordingly. What do I mean by that? You need to target your journal first. You need to write down which journal you are going to publish your article into, and then start writing, because each journal has its own guidelines, and you cannot think about one journal and then write according to the other journal, or write something very generalized first and then go ahead and change it according to the journal. In fact, what you should do is, in the beginning itself, since it's generally a teamwork, decide 2 or 3 journals which you would apply to. So in case one gets rejected, you know where to go next and where to go next. So read the journal, read about the journal, like how Dr. Ngopi said, and classify the types of journals we have: material journals, we have journals on implantology, on dental education, So first off, understand which journal you want to publish into, go to its author's guideline, read the author guidelines very carefully, highlight it and mark it. This is the kind of abstract they want. This is the kind of introduction they want. These are the number of words they want in each category. And once you have it all structured and right in front of you, you are then ready to begin with your manuscript writing. So we'll restrict our discussion to original research writing, even though research writing or manuscript writing can be for case reports, for systematic reviews, and a lot of other things, but that cannot fit in 1 hour's time. So we'll try to discuss only original research. And when we talk about original research, generally, this is the kind of diagram that comes in front of us, which is the anatomy of scientific paper. You know, there are two inverted triangles. And the concept here is that, you know, you start at a broader base, then narrow it down, then again start from a narrow base and expresses outwards. And they follow the IMRAD outline, which is a very standardized format of writing or understanding the anatomy of a scientific paper. But my understanding is slightly different, and it could look a little funny, but this is the way I think a scientific original research paper today looks like. It has components beyond IMRAD or introduction, material methods, results, and discussion. So except just those 4 points, we have so many other aspects to a scientific manuscript. As a researcher, one has to think about. So we have the title, we have the abstract. Somehow in IMRAD, they don't talk about title and abstract, and I'll tell you that they are the make and break of a publication. The third is the keywords. Fourth is an introduction, which I think looks like an inverted triangle. The methods looks like a circle. The results section looks like a rectangle. The discussion looks like a diamond. The conclusion forms the tip of the diamond, that is number 8. Number 9, the reference section looks like a parallelogram. You also have to write these little authors' contributions and acknowledgement. And you have the 12th number, which is the supplementary material, the supplementary file. And then you have this little rod running through the basic, like a backbone of your articles, which is the references running through the introduction, methods, results, and discussion. So in my opinion, this is what the anatomy of today's scientific original research manuscript looks like. And I'll be able to justify each shape and each part as I talk. So this is the equator network that you need to go first before you start. You go there and select the type of article, the type of study design you have, and download the PDF file for the guidelines. It's freely available. It's very simple to go there and download the PDF. In case you don't know, because you know there are around 408 guidelines, if I'm not wrong. If it's too confusing, then the search engine helps you to identify your search. So in these Dropbox, if you just enter the data, it will automatically give you the PDF, updated PDF that you need to download. Now, what I tell my postgraduates is you download the PDF, and once you have structured your entire manuscript, according to the guideline item number 1 in your Word document, you highlight it, write down 1, highlight number 2, write down 2. So it's easier even for the professor or guide to check that, yes, you have followed the reporting guideline in your writing manuscript. So that's the first thing, very simple thing that can be done, which will make life very, very easy. So let's move to the first thing, that is the title. Now the title, you know, just like a title, it looks like an elongated rectangle, very beautiful in its format. But even though it's not mentioned in IMRAD, I will tell you that the title, abstract, and keywords are the key for visibility of any article in today's date. Like I said, just publishing the article is not sufficient. The article needs to be visible. It needs to be shown on some search engine, either in Google Scholar or in PubMed. Now, these search engines are with very, very strong algorithms, and their algorithms will catch these keywords which are there in your title, in your abstract, and keywords. In those aspects, you know, the visibility of your article, and therefore the citation, and how many people read it and how many people download it, all that responsibility falls on the head of the title, abstract, and keywords. And therefore, it's very important to sit and select the article title very carefully. Also, you must understand that the largest readers group falls for the title and abstract. I mean, there are very few people who actually are interested in the research. Either they are doing a research on their own, or they are probably interested in seeing your methodology, etc. But most of the readers are just limited to the title and abstract. So therefore, it needs to be what it needs to be. And so you need to spend that kind of time to select your title. So how do we do this? First and foremost, write the article title at the end. Write the abstract and keyword. All these three things, which are the things which are driving your algorithms, should be written at the end, because by the end of it, you would have had the pulse, you would have caught the pulse of your manuscript. Even though you have done that research for 2 years or 3 years, we do it in parts, in fragments. So once you have finished your entire write-up, that's when you will be able to understand which keyword is most important that you think should be there in the title. Pick 8 to 9 words which you think are the most important aspects of your study. It could be the dependent, independent variables, the populations, the setting, the study design that you're into doing, the outcome measures that you are doing, primary or the secondary outcome measures. You write those 8 to 9 words in one side. The second side, what you do is write down the titles of your 3 or 4 parent article or key article which you had referred to. This gives you an idea of how the flow needs to be there, what are the words they have selected, and it helps you to structure your title. Then you go to the mesh terms on PubMed, and from there you again write down the mesh terms so that you incorporate mesh terms into your title. And then try joining all of this in different combinations by putting one in the front, by putting the other at the back, and concise it to short 10 to 15. 15 is a bit much, but around 10 words of title. Go iteratively, keep going back to those titles, come back to this, think of another title and share it with your co-researchers or your guide. Write down 4 to 5 of them and then see which one of them works the best. Of course, ensuring that there is no plagiarism or it is unique. So this part also, Dr. Ngopi had already touched that the title also needs to be it has to be different. So we'll also try and understand all of this through this simple example. I'm saying simple because it's easier to explain a mandibular implant supported overdenture. This is a study taken from the Journal of Prosthetic Dentistry, 2019. Now the title here says, Assessment of Masticatory Function of Mandibular Implant Supported Overdenture Wearers, a 3-year prospective study. So if you just think about it from the title perspective written by the researchers, they probably felt that 3-year perspective, the word 3-year has come here. Probably they felt that this was the key to their article. This should be there in the title because they probably followed the patients for 3 years. Is commendable. And so they wrote it into the title. The other thing is the outcome measure, which was mentioned here, that is the masticatory function. I'll explain slightly more in detail later. They are mentioned on whom. So mandibular implant supported overdenture wearers were there. I would have preferred if they would have written 2 implants or 4 implants because, that's how it would have caught my attention. But let's see how the story flows. The second part of it is the abstract, which is actually the mini version of the paper. The abstract looks like a square because it doesn't have too much to play with. In fact, it again is something that the algorithms of these major search engines are catching. So in PubMed, it's the title and the abstract that shows up. And so you can imagine the weight that the abstract needs to wear. And therefore, I also feel abstract is in fact very, very challenging as to what has to be selected that fits into 500 words, which makes it so important that it is found by a search engine. So you cannot leave out some information, yet you need to fit into those number of words that the journal asks you to do. So abstract is in fact very, very challenging to write. Again, try to write the abstract towards the end. Follow the journal guidelines because the way journals ask the headings under abstract may be different. And so you need to understand what the journal is asking. Now, the article that I selected, the abstract says statement of problem. Perhaps JPD talks about statement of problem. Some of the articles, journals talk about introduction or background. That is the term that is used in the abstract. Now here, if you see, the title had, caught probably my attention because it spoke about mandibular implants. I'm probably interested in understanding more, but it did not tell me how many implants were placed. But right in the first line itself, second line itself, it mentions the number of implants. So here now the reader understands and now goes ahead and reads the article because that's probably what he's looking at or wanting to search more about. The second part of it is the purpose of the aims. See, it very specifically talks about what was the purpose of the study which they started off, then material methods, then results, and then conclusion, which is a mirror image of the aims that I will talk slightly more in detail. So if you look at the format of the abstract, there's not much that you can play around with. So you have to really put in a lot of effort to select the most important information out of your research work that needs to go into the abstract. So that covers the two shapes that we are talking about, that is the title and the abstract. The third part is the keywords. Again, there's the weight of your algorithms. Now, here is what you can go into the PubMed mesh terms. If you don't know how to search for mesh terms, you can search the tutorials that are available on PubMed website. Even YouTube videos are there to show you how to go about searching the mesh terms. Now, again, mesh terms are something that these algorithms catch, and therefore they need to be there. Now, some journals, I understand, what they do is they ask you to write 4 to 5 keywords which are other than what are there in your title, simply because larger number of hits can be obtained by incorporating more number of keywords. So there is an entire thought process behind keywords. So you too need to think about what keywords you need to select to be able to put it there. So ensure that they are there as mesh terms. They are not only visible by the algorithm, but they are also scientifically correct terms that one can use. So when I searched for this particular title and I was wondering why masticatory function was used. So masticatory function really doesn't appear as a mesh term. So, they give you masticatory efficiency, that it's not there. Masticatory performance is not there. The word mastication is there, but it doesn't fit into the primary outcome measure. And therefore, they must have termed it as masticatory function, which serves the purpose fairly well. If you look at the next section, which is the introduction alone itself looks like an inverted triangle, if you ask me. And it basically answers the question why you are doing the research. After reading around 500 words, this is what should come out of your introduction. After all, why you are doing it. You are doing it because this information is known, this information is not known, this is therefore the need of the study, and this is what you aim to achieve. This completes the spectrum of introduction. So the concept here is you start from a broader aspect of the problem that you are handling. Then, like a cone, you slightly start moving to more specific issue that you are handling. Then you start moving on to what is not known or what is called as a research gap, which leads you to the need for the study. And this gives you the newness or the reason why you probably went ahead to do this research, and the reader must read it because this is what is new. And finally, it ends at the tip of it, with the aims as well as the hypothesis if there's any. Again, here you have the references of the journal running through your entire introduction. And the references also, in the introduction section, you can have around, I believe around 15 references is a very comfortable matter to fit in, which shows that there is enough scientific content in your introduction. Introduction is also a leeway to the rest of your article. So you write to, a more generalized statement in terms of your epidemiology, perhaps, instead of the problem, perhaps, and then gradually move to a more specific format. Now, introduction has parts to it, like I showed in this triangle. Each one of them is a separate part. When you write it, it's a broader part, then you move to a smaller part. They're fragmented components, but we need to ensure that all of them then fall into a beautiful flow. It's stitched together and it doesn't appear very fragmented. So the introduction, after you complete it, the reader knows what's coming ahead. It's like, showing a way to the rest of the manuscript. That this is what we intend to do. Now, please read forward as to how we did it. This is the role of the introduction. Now, if you see the article itself that I selected, here also they started off with a very generalized statement. They speak about wearers of mandibular complete dentures complain of retention and stability problems. They are not dealing with retention and stability. They are dealing with masticatory function. But they start talking about the generalized problem. Then they start talking about how implants came into being and how there are 2 implants which help improving the stability, and therefore in previous studies demonstrated an improved masticatory function. So slowly they have moved from a broader part to a more narrower part which they are trying to address. Then from there they start moving to the masticatory function, which is their primary outcome measure. And they also start moving towards the alveolar ridge height, which was their secondary outcome measure. They cover those things as well. They touch those things as well. They touch about what is known. So some fellow Kimoto and Garnett reported that this was already known. So this is the third point as what is known. Then they touch the point of what is not known. So here is, however, to the author's knowledge, studies associated with this are lacking. This is not known. And therefore they did the study. And therefore the purpose of the study is, which is the tip of the inverted triangle, in my opinion, which gives you the aims. Again, there is a reference pattern which is running through beautifully through the entire introduction. If you trace it backwards, according to this arrow that I've shown here, you will be able to appreciate all these points which exist in our introduction. So that justifies the shape of an introduction. The second part is, the next part is the method section. The method section answers the question as to how the research was done. So the introduction was why you did it, and methods will tell you how you did it. Now, you must understand that the person who has reached the methods section is now a serious person or a serious reader. See, in PubMed, there are very few articles which are an open access or an open access articles or free downloaded articles. The rest of them, they probably went through SkyHub or their own institutional access, downloaded the article, and then they started reading it. So just do understand that the reader who's reached the methods section is ideally perhaps a reader who's really interested in knowing how you obtained that particular research result. He's probably someone who's wanting to do the same. So if I have to do a research work, I follow an article who's done something similar. In that aspect, I should be able to reach to the same conclusion if I were to follow it in the same manner. In other words, the methods section helps to satisfy one of the most important characteristics of research, that is reproducibility. That is, anyone who would follow the same method would come to the same conclusion. And in therefore, my opinion, the methods section is a circle. So if somebody followed your article and did everything exactly the way you asked them to do, they would reach exactly this conclusion that you derived at. So this is the shape of the method section. The method section first and foremost hits the research design. Even though your title mentions the research design, the first sentence talks about what is your research design. It also talks about the ethical committee clearance. A lot has been spoken about already. But most importantly, it tells you the setting, the sampling methods, the sampling technique that was used, the control group that was used, how the samples were selected, the inclusion, the exclusion criteria, whether if there were it was laboratory-based study, how the samples were fabricated, what was the sample size and how it was selected, what was the method of data collection, what were the testing methods which were used, if it was a questionnaire, which questionnaire was used, and finally, what were the statistical tests that were applied into the next section, that is into the results section. So all of this put together completes the spectrum of what needs to be covered in the method section. Let's look at how these people did it. So yes, they have covered it, a prospective longitudinal study design. So they have mentioned the study design. They have mentioned the ethical committee approval. They have then mentioned about how the participants were recruited. So there's an inclusion exclusion criteria. Then they go ahead and explain the sample size. They also explain how the methodology of the testing was done. I mean, how the CBCT was made, how the masticatory ability was evaluated using subjective and objective methods. And finally, they have also explained what were the statistical tests or analysis and how they were used. So this completes the entire method, entire segment of methodology, which needs to be complete in its finest details so that each person can follow it the way you have done it. So here we complete the shape of the method section. We then move to the next section, which is the results section, which looks like a rectangle simply because it's got a lot of tables and graphs and diagrams set forth here. Now, the results section is a section which, you know, we may not be very confident in because it starts playing around with numbers, and where numbers come, people blank out a little bit. But the significance over here is, of course, the statistical analysis which your statistician would have used. That's not my prerogative. Our problem here is the application of those statistics in research, which he will not be able to do. So that is the interpretation of the results. That particular weight falls on our shoulders. So if he has applied this test, very good. But how do we interpret this test? Can we write it in a simple language so that somebody can ultimately analyze what you have done? So the application of the test results is what is again significant. So we need to write not only things which we found as significant using our hypothesis testing, but we also need to write down things which were statistically insignificant. So write down the analysis as well as the interpretation when you talk about the results. This particular article also, yes, then we also need to mention the descriptive statistic tests as well as inferential. So both of these things are written and explained very nicely in the results section. So if you see here, this is their descriptive analysis which they have done, the participants, the age of the participants, etc., the mean height, bone that they used. And then they go on to explain how the masticatory performance scores over the 3 periods that they took from 0 to in the middle and then to the third reading which was taken, how the change in the masticatory ability took place and how it was correlated to the bone height. So those were the statistical tests that are applied. Again, the results section also runs with referencing. So there is a referencing pattern that follows here as well, because this is also somewhere we are trying to draw parallelism to the work that was done before. The next part of the scientific manuscript is the discussion part, which is again a very, very important aspect to your article. Now, the discussion looks in itself like the discussion alone looks like a diamond, if you ask me, because here we start from a very specific point and we end it also at a very specific point, and somewhere in the middle we go very broad. I'll tell you how. The first and foremost line in your discussion should be the most important finding that you have achieved in your research work. So the most important finding starts as the tip of your discussion, and then it starts moving to a more broader format, as in what were the other findings that you did. All the findings that came in your results section need to be mirrored here in the discussion. So whatever tests were applied, probably 2 were applied, probably 3 were applied, they need to somehow be seen in the voice of those tests, or the results have to appear in the discussion. The other thing is, when I review articles, and the way I understand this to be is, the discussion is not really a justification of the methodology that you did. You know, many of us write it like that this particular X-ray was used because this X-ray is required for mapping the bone or something like that. It doesn't justify methodology. It justifies the results. The discussion is the entire body. Whatever may be your methodology, you have very explicitly explained that these are the things that you did. Now, why you did them need not really be mentioned in the discussion, because method section is generally following somebody's methods which were done previously, unless you have done something new, which of course you will mention. But more important for discussion, rather than explaining the methodology or justifying the methodology, is to justify the results. That is what the reader is interested in. Why did you get this particular result? If you are saying that the bone height does not affect the masticatory ability, kindly justify why does it not affect the masticatory ability? What did you do that you got this particular result? So the discussion weighs the bears the weight of answering the questions of your results rather than your method section. So you need to justify why you got it. There are two things to it. Either you have obtained your results similar to previous work, which also need to be quoted, which shows that you've not gone ahead out of the blue and found something. Someone has found something like that. We followed a similar methodology and we also got the same result. So you need to speak about someone who's done the work similar to mine. At the same time, the second part could be your work is not similar to somebody's, or dissimilar rather, to someone who's already done the previous work. Very good. That also needs to be mentioned because this gives the reader a perspective. I might individually have done something, but is it in sync with someone who's done it before? Have people also found something similar, or have you found something new? If you have found something similar, well, fair enough, it's justified. If you have found something new, I'm more intrigued as a reader to know why you have found this new finding. And therefore, you start then justifying your methodology. You start linking it to your methodology or some previous data or something that you have found new. That is where your justification of why you got or you didn't get a particular result comes into being. Again, whatever are your aims, if you could have a primary outcome measure and a secondary outcome and a number of secondary outcome measures, each one of them needs to be justified in your discussion. So mention whether your hypothesis then therefore got fully or partially accepted or rejected. You mentioned the strengths and limitations of your research. Most of us write our limitation. Somehow that particular paragraph comes out very easy to us, that we know the limitations of our study and these are the limitations of our study. But if you read the journals of a very high publishing houses like MDPI, they give a special paragraph to the strength of the journal of your research. What did the authors think was the strength, or what makes your research different from the others? It's a fantastic way of pitching your research different, or showing how it is different from other people's work. So write one or two lines about the strength and write one or two lines about the limitations, of course. Suggesting the future work is the next most important thing that you write in the discussion. And mind you, now from a very broader aspect where we are justifying our results, we have started moving more to a more narrower work of limitations and strengths. And we write one more line about suggesting the future work. It's like giving a leeway to the next researcher, like showing a way to the next person that here I stop, please start from here or continue from here. It's nice for a researcher also. If I have to follow your research, it's nice to know that you're already hinting me as to where to go. So it's a good way of suggesting or writing what the future of the research needs to be. So write 2 lines about the future work in this research. The last thing, which is the tip, which falls here, is the conclusion. I'll go to the next slide for the conclusion. Mind you, here also in the discussion, which actually bears the main weight of the referencing part, you have the entire references running through the backbone of your discussion. Now, the tip of the, both the triangles, here it's a diamond and here it's a triangle, is the aim is the tip over here and conclusion is here. And actually they are the mirror images of each other. Whatever your research wanted to achieve, were you able to or not able to achieve? That's what the conclusion is. Many a times we get flown in our work and we write things which are beyond the scope of our research. In the sense, I have not found it, but I have concluded it. That cannot be written in conclusion. So if there are 2 things, like very rightly put by this article, the purpose of this clinical study was to evaluate changes in masticatory function from baseline, that is 0 months to 3 months and 3 years in participants with mandibular overdentures. And so that was our first purpose. and to assess the effect of baseline mandibular bone height and volume on the masticatory function after 3 years. So these were the two main purposes of the article, and they are very beautifully mirrored it in the conclusion, saying that the masticatory function measured by mixing, the mixing ability index and the masticatory ability score showed significant improvement. So that was the conclusion for the first primary outcome measure. And then the baseline bone height and volume did not have any effect on the masticatory function. So that was their second conclusion. Very simple. Whatever they wanted to, the research aimed at, the research concluded the very same thing. So that is the way you write down the conclusion. You don't write things which you think can be concluded out of the research, but it was not tested for in your statistics. So that cannot come as conclusion. The next part to this is the references. Now the references, in my opinion, looks like a parallelogram. And why I say this is they need to be parallel or same throughout your manuscript. A, they need to be parallel to each other or same. B, they need to be same to what the journal asks you to be. Dr. Ngopi showed a very beautiful slide to show us, even in Vancouver system, how many different ways of citation or writing the references are. So whatever my journal asks me to do, I should be able to write the references parallel to it. And there are so many references format. Most of our journals are following Harvard's, Vancouver's, and some of them are now following APA system, AMA system. So whatever is the system of the journal, therefore you need to finalize your journal, in fact, before writing your article, so that this effort is not, you save upon the time and the effort. So in that aspect, the parallelism needs to be there between the entire manuscript of the references. And sometimes I see when I review articles in one sentence, because probably they changed their journal. So in one line, the journal is having the citation, the references in the correct style, but by the time you move to the fourth or the fifth references, the style of the reference has changed. So it's not uniform. So the referencing style needs to be uniform and parallel to what the journal is asking you. What I find more confusing is not just the simple journals that need to be cited. Now we need to cite books or websites or government documents, depending on your research work. Now here is where you need to understand how this particular referencing needs to be done in that particular referencing style. So you need to really spend that kind of time to do referencing. In fact, if you are in a team of researchers who are doing this work together, there should be someone separately handling references. It's so much of work in original research work. Dr. Ngopi has already shown us how to write this referencing, so I will not go into those details. The next part of the things which already have been touched in the previous lecture also is the acknowledgement part. Now, I have written these little aspects because these aspects are also written by the authors. So though Dr. Ngopi touched how, what is the significance of this in terms of manuscript, why I have put them here is that these are actually to be penned by you. So we actually need to write down our acknowledgements. So our language should be correct. You can read the acknowledgements written by previous people or other articles, and then follow the same English language and write down acknowledgement. Contribution is another thing, varies from journal to journal. And nowadays you can see there is a whole paragraph of very explicit manner of contribution with names about each person at the end of the journal article. So they write abbreviations like Pragati Kaurani will become P and K, and then PK has helped in these things. The other person has helped in these things. It's very written in great detail. So the contribution part is also very well thought of and very well structured and written. So this is again one thing that you have to write as a researcher. So it needs to be included in that entire shape of a manuscript. The last is the supplementary file, which is another thing which has come into being with the digital data or digital format of publishing. So supplementary files is anything that is over and above your main manuscript. In some journals, it is peer reviewed. In some, it may not be peer reviewed. So this is a material which is also called as a third party material, and it could be anything. In today's date, you could put your original data, you could put films, you could put screenshots, you could put some kind of a diagrammatic or a abstract format. If you see these material science journals, you can see, or biotechnology journals, you can see they show shapes of molecules rotating using 3D methods and things like that. So those are their supplementary files. And supplementary files in today's date, you can obtain a DOI of your supplementary file. There are repositories where you submit your supplementary data and get a DOI, which itself can be cited. So Figshare, OSF, these are certain repositories which can give you a DOI of your supplementary file. And all this concept of supplementary file has come out because of the concept of open sharing, which worked out during COVID or pandemic. It was because of the open sharing, open data sharing concept that allowed people to, fasten the pace of research during COVID. So they now follow this concept of adding a supplementary file. So if you click onto the supplementary file, either it opens like a PDF. In certain journals, it's just a PDF. In some journals, if you click supplementary file, it gives you a DOI, and the DOI, it leads you to either Figshare or OSF, and that's where the entire data opens up. Not so much so for prosthodontic researches, but if you did a large public health research where there is a huge data, collected from different organizations, that's where these supplementary files really, really work into. But nonetheless, this is what has come out. I have put this particular thing that has opened up from the Elsevier website, which talks about how you can take a database which can be linked, getting a DOI. You can take a DOI from Mendeley also and upload your data. So by the end of this, what has happened is you would have written a title, you would have written you would have written your introduction, keywords, and if it's a research team, somebody has worked on introduction, somebody has written on methods. So it's all fragmented. Each one of us would have worked upon one segment. If you're a postgraduate student, you would have worked upon the introduction in the month of November, and then you probably reached a discussion in July. And therefore, it's all very fragmented. Now what you need to do is start linking it. It cannot be fragmented. Parts of the manuscript need to flow. The reader needs to actually read it even like a story, even though it's not a story, but it should have some kind of a connect. So even though these parts are all fragmented, they all need to start falling into place by some kind of link with each other. And so the paragraphs need to be linked, and there are linking words or methods by which you can start linking these things together, so that it's for a reader, it appears like a beautiful story as it flows. So there's even the thought processes are then not fragmented. They are able to connect the introduction to the discussion, the methods to your conclusion, and everything starts connecting like match the following kind of a thing. So you should have these linking words which beautifully link and connect the paragraphs, and then the entire manuscript in its totality. And by the end of it, it's like, all words put together in a beautiful and pearl necklace, which flows beautifully and looks very nice. So like I said, the writing of the scientific manuscript it's an art, it's a learned art. A lot of effort needs to go in, and a lot of conscious effort needs to go in. It needs to have the science part correct. It needs to have the art part correct. You cannot go wrong in the English. You definitely cannot go wrong in the science. So since it needs to be a balance for us as Indians who don't have English as our first language, it can become an issue. So there are few things which can help you to write manuscripts. Some are free, some are paid, but there's no harm going ahead and paying so long as you get a good result out of it, so that at the end of the day, a good journal accepts your article. So this is Academic Phrase Bank, which is actually freely available on Equator, on the same website that I showed you. If you go there, click the academic phrase, it gives you, Academic Phrase Bank is like an entire bank of phrases. So in introduction, if you click introduction like this one, if you go down, it will give you some 20-25 phrases which you can use in introduction. The same way in methods and same way in other parts of your article, some contradictory statements. It gives you how you can write it. The thing here is you need to manually go click, search and find. So it's free, but you need to do that effort. Vis-a-vis Ref and Write, it's a software which is a paid software. So 14 days free trial, but after that it's paid. But again, like Dr. Gopi Chandra said, they use their cloud. So first and foremost, you should be sure that this whatever you're uploading, it is going somewhere. Someone is kind of tracking it. But other than that, Ref and Write is one which helps you easily. You don't have to manually search. If you click it, it gives you options on its own. Its algorithm picks up your own write-up and suggests paraphrasing, suggests different words to write the same thing. In fact, I think it can also catch your plagiarism also to a certain extent. It tells you whether it is repeated or not and things like that. So it is a software, if you wish, it's not too expensive either, but it can help you for writing a good English in your manuscript. Others are Grammarly. Then the software or reference managers also lots has been spoken about and is continuously being spoken about with the use of reference managers. Some of them are free, some of them are again paid. Again, you need to, it's a learning curve. You need to learn how to use them. And if you did use them, I'm not sure if life becomes easier or more difficult, because I have tried my hand on it. Sometimes I find it's easy. Sometimes I, stumble a little bit still. Probably old school timers, we are used to writing it manually in our hand more comfortably, doing it that way. But maybe the younger generation will find it easier to use a reference manager. Definitely reference managers help you to manage your references properly. At the same time, if your journal, if you have got rejection from one journal and you go to the next journal and there is a change in the referencing style, that will also immediately help you. So in all those aspects, these things are the definite methods of helping you to write. Lastly, of course, ensure that you're not cut, copying, pasting. There is plagiarism. There are again softwares Dr. Gopi Chandra has already spoken about. At the end, I would just like to say that the writing of a manuscript is a beautiful journey. It doesn't end at the point of publishing. There is so much more to it after publishing also, because if you just published in a dead journal and no one was reading it, no one was citing it, no one was talking about it on Twitter or on Facebook, or nobody, there are no downloads, there are no matrices to it, you will not enjoy publishing it either. So the concept should be publishing and publishing into a good journal so that there is a presence, there is a web presence of your article. So this high of acceptance can only be felt once you get that letter of acceptance in your mailing box. So with that, I end my topic. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to speak and express my views. This is my book on research methodology in dentistry. It's available on Amazon and Flipkart for those who want to brushen up their concepts on research. At the same time, I have a Facebook group on research in dentistry. And the idea here is the same, to share ideas, concepts, and learn together as we grow. So with that, thank you very much, Dr. Nitte sir. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. Thank you for your patient hearing.
Thank you, ma'am, for the detailed insight on how to write a scientific manuscript. Here are some questions which I like to ask. Is there any necessary to elaborate results separately other than in a discussion?
Other than in the discussion?
Yes, I mean results which has to be elaborated in detail.
Yes, the results need to be justified in the discussion. Otherwise, there is no way of saying, how do I justify whatever I obtained? I could have either accepted my hypothesis or rejected my hypothesis. So the results portion has to be justified in the discussion. Definitely, yes.
Then one more is regarding the guidelines for number of references to be included in the publication. Like, is there any guidelines like these many numbers have to be?
No, there is no guideline. The difference comes in the number of words that a particular article or journals ask you to. some journals are giving 3,000 words for original research. So if you put 3,000 words, at most you will be able to fit 30 to 35 references. More than that, you will not be able to fit. Vis-a-vis, there are some journals which have no number of word limit at all. Many of these good publishing houses, MDPI or Dove Press, even British medical journals, they don't give you word limits. So now there, what happens is your referencing can go up to 45, 50 because you don't have a word limit. So your discussions can be very, very elaborate, very, very long. So if the discussion is long, the number of references automatically will increase.
And is it necessary to include a questionnaire? Is it compulsory a questionnaire has to be included in a publications?
Yeah, you see the question part is a very tricky situation, because the questionnaires need to, if you are using the questionnaire and writing it in your manuscript, there's no problem in using the questionnaire. But if you are writing the questionnaire in your manuscript, you should have a copyright to it. I mean, you should have a permission to use the questionnaire. Otherwise, it will be caught in plagiarism and your publishing house may not accept it. So either you take a permission to use a questionnaire, or else you don't use the questionnaire, you just write the reference or cite it that you used this particular reference, this particular questionnaire as it was given in this particular article. So the problem over here is to get the permission to use a questionnaire.
If the questions are framed by us, the questionnaire is made according to our article, according to our study, and it is framed by us, even then it has to be included in our article?
No, ma'am. If the questionnaire has been framed by us, there is absolutely no issue there again. Only thing is your questionnaire needs to be validated. So if your questionnaire is validated, you are, it's your own original work, you go ahead and use it. But the validation itself is a very complicated process. It has to go through content validation, a face validation process. And then you are sure that, yes, whatever you have obtained is correct. So in that case, if you have gone through the process of validating your questionnaire, then of course it's your own work. There is no question of obtaining a permission to use it. But if you are using someone else's, then you need to be sure that you get some kind of a permission. Very recently, I did a questionnaire-based study, which I published. Now, there the problem was the questionnaire was available on public domain, but it was by Wiley. Now, Wiley is, if you click Wiley and you see, then the journal itself does not give you permission to publish the questionnaires. So even though we included the questionnaire, we had to retract the questionnaire and we didn't write the questionnaire in our article because Wiley does not give you the permission to publish it. We had to pay Wiley to use the questionnaire. So you need to be very careful when you're using pre-used or pre-validated questionnaires. And if you're using your own or making your own questionnaire, then you please validate it, pilot test it, and then use it in your manuscript.
Thank you, Dr. Pragati. Now over to Dr. Shetty.
Thank you, Dr. Pragati, for that wonderful lecture on manuscript writing.
Thank you, sir.
It was indeed, it was short, but it was very clear. And it had very good inputs for all the researchers. I can make out you spent some, really you delegated with the other speaker, Dr. Ngopi, so that there is no repetition of the topics, because what happens generally, these topics are quite overlapping, but there's going to be, very often there is overlapping. I mean, very often there is repetition, but you made it sure that such a thing doesn't crop up. Thank you. We'll be sending you our certificate of appreciation to do. Please do accept it, and probably, definitely, we'll be looking forward to work with you, probably in the field of research. Probably we can do some collaborative work as well. Thank you, Dr. Pragati, for all your time and for the wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you. As we come to the end of today's two lectures, I would like to invite Dr. Sadhini, who is a faculty at Department of Prosthodontics, to give the vote of thanks.
Thank you, sir. On behalf of the Department of Prosthodontics, I would like to thank our resource persons for today, Dr. Ngopi and Dr. Pragati Kaurani, for sharing their valuable knowledge and input on research publication. I would like to thank Nitte University for all their support in our endeavors. We would like to appreciate all the support provided by the Staff Development Center, Nitte University, in conducting this event. We would like to thank our Principal and Dean, Professor Dr. U.S. Krishna Nayak, all the heads of the department, faculties, and postgraduates in joining us today in making this event a success. I kindly request everyone to fill the feedback form, which will be mailed to you to receive the e-copy of the certificate of participation. Thank you, everyone, and have a pleasant day.
Okay.